Well, hello and welcome to this English lesson about kids' toys. I thought that since Christmas was coming up in a number of countries around the world, that it might be a good time to talk a little bit about kids' toys. This will be a lesson about toys that I had as a kid, toys that are modern and current, some toys that are very old-fashioned, but I think it will be a fun lesson. It's fun to learn all of the names for different toys in English. I think most of these toys will be familiar to you. I think you'll have the same toys in your country. I do have to say one thing though. The slides for this lesson are very colorful. I think kids' toys are often painted, or the colors are usually very vibrant and bright. So welcome once again to this very colorful lesson about kids' toys. So blocks, probably one of the first toys that every child has is a set of blocks. Sometimes the blocks have the letters of the alphabet on the side. Sometimes they're just plain blocks like this. And they're the first toy you can play with where you can hold them, you can stack them, you can roll them, you can throw them. Just don't throw them too hard. But blocks are a very, very common toy for a very, very young child. Often the block is made out of wood, so we would call them wooden blocks. When a toy is made out of wood, we use the word wooden to describe it. So some kids have plastic blocks, some of them have wooden blocks. One of the first toys that you have as a child. And then another very common toy is a toy called Lego. I put this as the second slide because this was my favorite toy when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I can't remember when I got my first Lego set, but I do remember quite often playing with Lego. Lego are a collection of bricks that click together and then they stick together, so you can build things out of them. You can build houses, you can build little cars because you can get wheels for them. Lego is just a very, very fun toy. In fact, I think my mom still has my box of Lego from when I was a kid. I should go pick that up because maybe I should reminisce and build something. We also have what are called action figures. An action figure is a small figurine that's made similar to look like something, someone in a movie or cartoon. So here you see the Incredible Hulk. This is an action figure of the Incredible Hulk. I didn't have a lot of action figures when I was a kid. I did have toy soldiers when I was a kid, but some people had action figures from G.I. Joe when I was a kid, and I didn't have one. I don't know if you know what G.I. Joe is. Brent from Speak English with This Guy would know what that is. But yes, an action figure. So in this current modern era, you could have an action figure from the Marvel movies. You could have an action figure of Iron Man or Captain America if that was something you enjoyed watching. A puzzle. This is what I would call a classic toy. A puzzle is simply a picture that's cut into pieces, and you need to figure out how to put it back together. When I was a kid, I had a lot of puzzles. Now, when you have puzzles as a kid, they have less pieces than a puzzle would have for an adult. My mom loves to do puzzles, but they have 1,000 or 2,000 pieces. When I was a kid, I had puzzles like this. This puzzle has, let's see here, I think about 35 pieces if I'm counting correctly. That would be a normal puzzle for a small child. I loved doing puzzles as a kid. They were a lot of fun. This, I would say, is one of the most common kinds of kids' toy, and this is a stuffed animal. We also, in our house, sometimes just call them stuffies, but a stuffed animal is a soft toy. This is a teddy bear, a very common type of stuffed animal. I had a small dog as a stuffed animal as a child, and when I got older, my sister and I started to fight because we both thought the stuffed animal belonged to us, but I was pretty sure it belonged to me. It was a small red and white dog, and still to this day, I believe that the stuffed animal that I had as a kid was mine. but my sister still thinks it was hers. Anyways, once again, a stuffed animal is a very soft toy, almost has the same stuffing as a pillow. And a teddy bear is one of the most common kinds. And then we have, of course, all kinds of toy cars, toy vehicles. When I was a child, I had toy tractors, but I think most kids will have a toy car or toy truck. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. I'll talk about smaller ones in just a moment. But definitely when I was a kid, I did have toy cars, but because we lived on a farm, I had toy tractors as well. So just a car, but made really small for a kid, or a tractor or truck, but made really small for a child to play with. And we had a specific kind of toy car and toy truck when I was a kid. We would call them either dinky cars, Hot Wheels, or Matchbox cars. So here you can see them. They were about this big. They were very tiny. I had a small collection of Hot Wheels cars when I was a kid. By the way, we have different names because I think Hot Wheels and Matchbox are the name of the company. And I'm not sure about dinky car. I think it's an older way to talk about it, to talk about tiny little cars. They're all the same scale. I'm not sure what the scale is, but they were all about this big. They were a lot of fun to play with. And you could get a track to drive them down, and you could hook the track up to a table and let your cars drive down the track. That was a lot of fun. When I was a bit older as a child, I had a yo-yo. Again, this is a bit of a mixture of, this lesson is a mixture of older types of toys and newer types of toys. We would say the yo-yo has stood the test of time. The yo-yo is still a very common gift today. We have a couple yo-yos in our house. I do like doing a yo-yo. I should make a video someday of me yo-yoing. I think that's the word for it. But the yo-yo is a spinning top, basically, with a string that you can throw down and then pull back up again. It's a lot of fun. I actually learned how to do the yo-yo when I was in university, not when I was a child. When I was a child, I had one, but I didn't really know how to use it. This is a toy that I never had. This is what we would call an old-fashioned toy. This is a toy that people had many, many years ago. Before my time, there were things called rocking horses. They were usually made out of wood. So it was a small horse with rockers on the bottom. So if you sat on it as a kid, you could rock back and forth. I think these were pretty common like in the 50s and 60s. I'm not sure. I think my mom had a rocking horse when she was a kid, but I did not have a rocking horse. But certainly if you watch an old TV show or an old movie, and if there's children in it, they might have a rocking horse. One of the other toys you get very early on in life is called a rattle. So this is anything that you shake that makes noise. This is a very common toy for babies. When a baby is able to sit up and hold things, one of the first things you might give the baby is a rattle. And that's why we sometimes call it a baby rattle. We actually just say baby rattle. But a baby rattle is something a child can hold and shake that makes a little bit of noise. I don't have one in front of me, but I should have brought one. I think we have one in the house somewhere. Probably another very, very common type of toy is just a doll. This is a common toy. It's usually just a small person. Sometimes like the far doll, they're kind of soft. Sometimes like this closer doll, which is called a Barbie doll. So the girl in the blue dress right beside me is called a Barbie doll, a very common type of doll. Usually kids, when they have dolls, they will play house. When you play house, it means that you play with your dolls as if they're people, and maybe the doll gets in her doll car and goes and gets some groceries, or the doll goes to her doll work or something like that. But dolls are certainly a very, very common toy. If I was to say top 5, I think dolls are in the top 5 as type of toy that kids play with. Educational toy. So I didn't have toys like this when I was a child, but there are toys that are educational toys. This is a toy that it looks like the child had to build it. It looks like it has some electronics on it. It looks like they needed to attach the wheels and they needed to hook up wires and they probably needed to put a battery in it. And I'm sure it drives around. So as they built this toy and as they play with this toy, they're also learning something. So we would call it an educational toy. When I was a kid, my brother had I think he had a science lab or a little electronics lab where he could learn how to make and program different things. It was really, really cool. He enjoyed building stuff with it. A frisbee. So a frisbee is a disc that you can throw, and when you throw it, it flies really nicely. It kind of glides through the air. You can throw a frisbee back and forth to another person. When I was a kid, I did have a frisbee. Frisbees are super fun. When I was in university, I played a little bit of frisbee golf. So frisbee golf is where you play golf, but you use frisbees instead. And I think there's something called ultimate football, where you play football, American style football, but you use a frisbee instead. But at its simplest level, it's fun to have a frisbee just to throw back and forth. It's fun to play frisbee with a friend. Do you want to go play frisbee? Okay, let's go play frisbee. And you throw it back and forth. When I was a kid, a relative visited from Holland and he brought gifts for all of us. And he gave me a kite. I had never had a kite before. A kite is a small flying toy with a string, a long string on it. And on a windy day, you can go and fly your kite. So the wind catches the kite, which goes up in the sky, and then you hold the string and the kite flies up in the air. It was a lot of fun. It was a big kite with a lion on it. And I'm not sure the exact details, but I had it for, I think, almost a whole summer, and then eventually it did break. It broke, but I did enjoy flying my kite. So another common type of toy that a lot of kids have is a kite. We also had, when I was a kid, we always had water guns. So water guns shoot water. When it's hot in the summer, it is very fun to have water guns. It's fun to have water gun fights. So you fill your gun with water and then you go and squirt people. They're also sometimes called squirt guns. So water gun, squirt gun, a very fun toy to have on a hot day, but not good to use the squirt gun to squirt water on your parents or adults. Adults don't like it when little kids run around with water guns and shoot them with water. We also, as kids, sometimes just had toy guns. Toy guns are sometimes futuristic. It might look like a laser gun. Sometimes it just looks kind of like a real gun, but sometimes you would play different games. You would play cops and robbers. And so cops and robbers is when some kids pretend they're the robbers and other kids try to catch them. But definitely we do have different types of toys. Some are a little strange. It is a little strange to me that you would make a toy out of something as destructive as a gun, but we do have them. And then there's something called a nerf gun. So I'm not sure if you've ever had a nerf gun. It shoots a very soft foam projectile. And we actually own this very nerf gun. It is kind of fun because it has a suction cup on the end. So the projectile or bullet will stick to the wall when you fire it. So nerf gun, very fun to play with. If you have a target on the wall, it's fun to shoot the nerf gun at the target. So as I mentioned before, we sometimes have wooden toys. It could be wooden blocks. It could be a wooden train set. Wooden train sets are actually very common still. We have an entire wooden train set at our house still. It's from Thomas the Tank Engine, I think. Thomas, yes. My kids loved playing with it. The tracks were made of wood and would connect together, and then they could drive their little wooden train on the train track. So wooden toys are still very popular. And there's other wooden toys as well. There's a toy where you have a ball on a string and you have a wooden cup and you have to try and get the ball into the cup. Wooden toys are still good and still fun. So I never had a radio controlled car when I was a child, but my younger brother did. I think they were invented sometime between when I was a teenager and he was still a kid. So he had a radio controlled car. We sometimes call them remote controlled cars. But basically, this is a car that you can drive using a controller. The car has batteries in it, and you can drive the car around the room using the controller. I think there's all different types of controllers. My muscle memory said this is how you control it, so we must have had a controller like that. But lots of fun. When the batteries are dead, you recharge the batteries, but it lets you drive a car around and have a lot of fun. And you can do little jumps with the car and those kinds of things. So this is probably the most common type of toy right now. And some people would say it's not a toy, but I think it's a toy, and it's called a gaming console. Some people have a PlayStation, some people have an Xbox, some people have a Switch, a Nintendo Switch, or an older console. This is something you connect to your television and you put games in it, or you download games onto it. You might have a cartridge that you put in, or you might download games from the internet, and then you use a controller to play a game on your television. We have had a number of different consoles. Usually the Nintendo console was the most popular. I think we had a GameCube, and then we had a Nintendo Wii, and now we have a Nintendo Switch. So a very common toy. But the only thing I don't like is I feel like this replaced a lot of other really good toys. A lot of kids now just play games, and they don't play with their yo-yo or their frisbee or their radio-controlled car. And if you play a game on a console, you buy a video game. So we sometimes during Christmas break play Mario Kart with our kids. We're not good enough. Jen and I usually lose, but after a few days, we do get a little bit better. Just takes time to relearn how to play it every year. And another common toy is to have a toy kitchen. So when our kids were young, we had a toy kitchen. It looked a little bit like this. It had a toy microwave and a toy mixer and a toy coffee maker and a toy toaster. And it also had toy dishes, cups, and plates. And then sometimes our kids would play house as well using the toy kitchen. They would pretend they were making breakfast. They would pretend that they were eating lunch. They would do a lot of fun stuff like that. So a toy kitchen is just another, I guess, a collection of different toys. You certainly have your toy cups and your toy mixer and everything like that. So toy kitchen, lots of fun. Our kids really enjoyed playing in their toy kitchen when they were little. Sometimes kids have a tea set. A tea set is simply all of the same things you would use as an adult, but they're either made out of wood or plastic and much smaller so that kids can pretend to have tea. They can have a little tea party with their toy tea set. So we definitely had a toy tea set in our house. Our children played with it a lot. Some people like to play with model trains. When I was a child, we actually had a model train set, and it was very, very fun. We had a big table, and we could set up all of the tracks, and we had a toy train with toy train cars, and then we had a little electric controller, and you could drive the train around the track. It was very, very cool. It was really nice because I would imagine different things happening on the toy train, like the conductor would stop the train, and I would just tell little stories to myself while I played with my toy train set or model train. It was a lot of fun. A lot of kids will have tub toys. Tub toys are toys that you play with when you have a bath, that you play with when you're in the tub. Usually they look like this. They're soft. They usually Sometimes you can fill them with water and squirt water, but tub toys are a lot of fun for kids. When they're having a bath, there's lots of bubbles from the soap, and they can play with their tub toys while they are in the tub, while they are taking a bath. And then we also have Sandbox toys, which are also beach toys. You can take these toys to the beach. By the way, a sandbox is something like this. It's an area in your yard where you put some sand for kids to play with. Sand is very fun to play with. You can dig in the sand. You can build things out of the sand. You can do sand sculptures. But certainly sandbox toys are things like little shovels, a little pail, a little dump truck, all of the things that you would enjoy while playing in the sandbox. And then, of course, there's the bike. I would put this on as one of the top 5 toys. I like bikes. I like it when kids bike around. I like it when they enjoy the outdoors by riding their bike. And there are all different kinds of bikes for kids. There's super tiny bikes for really little kids, all the way up to bigger bikes that they can use when they are a teenager. Now, there is a type of toy called a stacking toy. There are toys where you can build towers. Even blocks could be considered a stacking toy, but this is something that very young children learn to do. It's good for their brain. They learn to take different wooden objects or plastic objects and stack them. That toy over there, I think, is a very common toy that kids play with, that parents give them, and we would call it a stacking toy. Another top 5 toy, the ball. There are all different kinds of balls in the world. Here you see a football, a basketball, a soccer ball, and a baseball. They're not actual size though. I think these are small plastic versions, but it's very common. If you were to look in a kid's toy box, there's probably a ball in there somewhere. A small one, a bigger one. It's really fun to kick a ball, throw a ball, hit a ball. A ball is a very, very, very common type of toy. Another top 5, I would say. Now, we want our children to express themselves artistically. We want children to be creative. And one of the ways we do that is by giving them crayons so that they can color. This child is coloring. This child is using crayons to color. That is the verb we used. I'm going to do some coloring. He's going to color in his coloring book. So here you see crayons are small things you can draw with. They come in different colors. Usually they're made out of wax or a waxy substance. And they are just one of the first things a kid will use when they start to draw and start to be creative. A Rubik's Cube. This is a toy I had as a child. I could do the Rubik's Cube in less than 3 minutes. Currently, one of my children can do the Rubik's Cube in about a minute. And I have forgotten how to solve the Rubik's Cube. The Rubik's Cube was very popular when I was a child. It was a must-have toy when I was about 9 or 10. A must-have toy is the toy that every child wants that year for Christmas. It's basically a cube where you can turn all the sides. And when you mix it up, there's different colors everywhere. And when you solve it, each side of the cube has the same color on it. I loved doing the Rubik's Cube. I might relearn the Rubik's Cube this winter. I think that might be good for my brain to relearn how to do the Rubik's Cube. Another common toy would be the Slinky. The Slinky is either a metal or plastic spring. And it will actually, if you put it at the top of a stairs and you start the Slinky, it will walk down the stairs by itself. Or you can have it in your hands like this, and it goes back and forth and makes a very funny, interesting noise. I didn't have a Slinky as a kid, but my sister did, and I think my brother did. There was always a Slinky somewhere in the house, and it was a super fun toy. And here we have the cardboard box. When you buy something as a parent, when you buy something like a refrigerator or a stove or even a computer, It comes in a box, and sometimes kids just like playing in the box. They like pretending it's a fort. They like pretending it's a spaceship. Sometimes they'll color on the side of the box. Sometimes they'll cut holes in the box to make windows. But a plain old cardboard box, a big cardboard box, can be an awesome toy for kids. So if you're a parent, don't throw the big boxes out. Give them to your kids at least for a week or two to play with. I'm sure they will enjoy it. And then we have the board game. A board game is a game that you play on a table with other players. A board game has rules. A board game is something you can win. So when you play a board game, you try to win. You learn the rules and you use different strategies to try and win the game. I like playing Scrabble. My mom loves playing Scrabble. I cannot beat my mom at Scrabble. She's too good. But Scrabble is a board game where you try to make different words and they can connect together if they share a letter. So Scrabble is a fun game to play. You should play it with other people who are learning English someday. It's a great way to learn English as well. You'll learn some new words. Play-Doh. So Play-Doh is, I think it's also called plasticine, but it's a very soft dough. Dough is something that you make when you're making bread. When you mix water and flour, you get dough. But we also have this type of dough, which is for kids to play with. It comes in different colors. They can make little things out of it. They can make a little dinosaur or a little dog because they can mold the clay any way they want. So Play-Doh is a very fun toy. Just don't mix all the colors together. That's always a bad thing. You might have had a toy robot as a kid. Depends how old you are. When I was a kid, they were just starting to have toy robots, but they weren't really robots. But a robot is kind of a little toy. You might wind it up and it walks, or it might have batteries and you push a button and it walks, and maybe its arms move. Maybe it talks in a robot voice. So it's not a real robot. It doesn't clean your house for you, but it is certainly, it looks like a robot. It probably has flashing lights and buttons and probably does. It should probably at least walk, I would think. When I was a kid, I entered a coloring contest. The local hardware store had a coloring contest, and my sister and I drew pictures. I drew a picture of purple mountains, I remember, and we submitted it, and then we won the coloring contest. And the prize was an Etch A Sketch. An Etch A Sketch is a really old toy where you turn two knobs and it draws a picture on the screen. But you have to draw it in one complete line. So one knob moves the line up, the other knob moves the line over, and then you can, by turning both knobs, you can draw. And then when you don't like what you've drawn or you want to erase it, you turn it upside down and shake it. And then when you put it down again, you can start drawing again. I loved my Etch A Sketch. I think because at that age, it was kind of like a computer. It's not a computer at all, but it feels a little bit like a computer. It looks a little bit like a tablet, doesn't it? But Etch A Sketch, I really, really enjoyed playing with my Etch A Sketch. Probably one of my favorite toys as a kid, Etch A Sketch. I should buy another one just for old time's sake. That's when you buy something just for fun because it reminds you of your childhood.